Now, another form of design, which is completely different than a logo mark or brand identity system, is publication design, right? So a lot of the designs that we do are print materials. So what's the primary difference, do you think, strategically, like with your process for creating a publication?
I think it's somewhat similar. Find inspiration, go to the sketchbook, comp some ideas, and then, like I said, execute in design.
Okay. So we have an example. So one of the examples that we did was an annual report for one of our clients, Camarena Health. And so Camarena Health, every year we do an annual report for them. And really the content kind of dictates the design. So we know what we want to say for the report. We have highlighted stories and key statistics, and a lot of times annual reports are very boring, and so our goal is to try to make what would be seemingly boring content and make it fun and interesting to look at. So the very first thing we have for this report was these like really lo-fi sketches. So we just put these on standard 8.5 by 11 paper, and we just started kind of drawing some stuff out. So we had some content already pre-written, and so we had an idea of what things were going to be laid out, and then we sketched these crazy little things. So it's nothing, I mean, you don't have to be an artist, right? These are just like smiley faces and lines and stuff just to kind of give us direction, right? And so I think we drew a lot of these things together, and I'm not going to say who drew what because it's pretty embarrassing, but I might have drawn that.
I'll take credit for this one.
Okay, there you go. So this is really, I mean, I would call this a wireframe for a publication. So really lo-fi, and these are spreads. So this would, if this was a booklet, front cover, back cover, then you open it up and you have what's, our table of contents. And so this is giving you kind of direction, right? So you already have design elements pre-made, which was like their logo. And that was about it, right? Because we had our own custom typeface and kind of style guide just for this. So what did you do with this?
As far as...
So we drew these out kind of together.
Right.
I gave them to you, and then you developed something really cool.
There was some parameters that you had set off, and from there I, did my own sketches, took it into InDesign, and then here's what we came up with as far as the mock-up.
This is super professional, high quality mock-up, stapled together. And what did you just print this at here or at your house?
Home? Yeah,
from your house?
Print that from home, and gives us a better idea of the physical.
So you went literally straight from here to designing this stuff and then printing it out.
Right.
Very cool. And these red letters is just like my markup. So yeah, we could have done all this digitally, but for me, it's easier just to look at something physical, mark it up with red pen, and then give it back. So we got sticky notes, red pen markups, and then you took this and you developed. Let's see what the digital file looks like.
Let's look for that. Usually what I begin with is setting up the margins and the columns.
Did you create a stylescape for this one, or you just went straight to design?
I don't think we had a stylescape for this one. We went directly to the design.
And you're designing in InDesign?
That's correct. So I think it's very helpful to have the grid per se. It gives you some parameters to keep your design work in. So,
and not all of this is in InDesign, right? So are you doing some of this stuff in Photoshop and bouncing back between Photoshop, Illustrator?
Yeah, I would say 80% is InDesign, and then, for example, if I want to edit this picture, which I did, we can, from this application, go directly to Photoshop.
Yeah, so that graphic is obviously being used as a big primary element on your InDesign file, but you're actually illustrating that in Illustrator and then tossing it into InDesign.
Right, linking it into InDesign.
One of the important parts about publication design is, again, the content a lot of times dictates the design. And so for this particular one, we had all the content pre-written. We strategized with the client and figured out what sections we were going to talk about and how many words per section we were going to include. But one of the key things about being a graphic designer and designing a publication is to have some sort of hierarchical logic. So you understand what the sections are, what the headers are, and what the body copy is, so that way you have some sort of consistency across everything, right? So for this particular annual report, we have main sections, and then each of those sections had topics that we're talking about, and each of those topics had a headline and body. And so to make sure that the reader understands where they are and what they're reading and how it ties into the report and the overall section, what are some of those things that you've done?
Mostly color differentiation. So each section has its own color. I think you had recommended that.
So this is like our intro page for the greater access section. So the greater access has the color green, it's got its header, and then looks like each of the sections, or each of the pages or spreads in the section has that little green trim. And then the titles for each of the stories are obvious there because they're using the big header font.
And then as soon as a new story comes up, it changes in color, allowing the viewer to know when they're in a different section.
Right. So yeah, it not only needs to look beautiful, but it has to have some sort of logical hierarchy of content. So especially for a report like this, because I forget how many pages this is, but I think it's like 20-something pages. We need to make sure that if the reader's going through it, they understand what section they're reading and how it ties into the overall report. So basically for this, we went from strategy concept to having an outline of what the contents of the report was going to include. Then we wrote out the content and wireframed those out into those really lo-fi sketches, and Chris went straight to design utilizing InDesign as well as Photoshop and Illustrator depending on what elements were included, and printed those out. We marked them up, and then we went through a couple of rounds of revisions until we landed on this final product, which is this cool publication design. So you open it up and boom, we have our intro table of contents. We have a cool letter from the CEO, infographics, our first section with the contents in that section, chiropractic with the content there. They have a new dental facility, their women's practice, and then boom, we go to the next section. Very cool.